the Tripping of the Color. It was one of their first public appearances, newlyweds, and everyone was in a good mood and upbeat. But then, literally, but then, he writes, Kate asked Meg what she thought of her first Tripping of the Color. And Meg joked, colorful. And a yawning silence threatened to swallow us all whole. That's the end of the story. I'm sorry, what? What are you talking about? This was the beginning of the end for Meghan and Catherine. Hey, how are you? Welcome to another episode of I'll Spare You the Details, where we're going through Prince Harry's spare, and we're so close to being done, but we're not there yet. And in today's episode, we are going to get heavy into the discrepancies between Harry and Meghan and William and Kate. This entire section today is a real head scratcher. If you're here for things to make sense, this episode isn't for you. All of these stories in this section, it's just baseless allegation upon baseless allegation. It's petty grievances. It's secret annoyances. It's inexplicable offenses. It just doesn't, none of these stories are going to ring true. To anybody who is in any kind of mature emotional state, none of these stories are going to make sense to us. Okay, so I'm telling you, I was so frustrated reading this because I don't understand even bringing up half of these instances. Like, literally, I don't understand. It's like, if you're going to go through the trouble of telling me that that William was hateful to you, that Kate, what a monster she is, that they were always making you and Meghan feel bad, that they were always trying to cause problems, then you're going to need to catalog how that came about. You can't just say. Anyway, I mean, I don't know why I'm acting surprised. This is how he does, right? This has been my problem throughout this entire book. Make a petty statement, give me no foundation, whine and complain, act like you are justified in your indignation, but then leave the rest of us hanging. We can't side with you if we don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, this whole thing is all about William and Kate and the way that they just, you know, they're cold people. They're cold, they're hateful, they're all the day long dangling their privilege over Harry and Meghan. There's this one scene that I thought was hilarious. Or the first time they go into William and Kate's home. When they go into William and Catherine's home, the jealousy that they feel over all the stuff that they have, and then they start comparing it to their own home. It was, I mean, it's comedy gold, I have to say. Okay, let's just get on with it. Let me see, is there anything that I need to discuss from the comments? Oh, last episode was all about the tiara episode, and, you know, it was pre-wedding stuff. So all those famous stories that we'd heard pre-wedding, you know, about the dresses and the tiara. And I just wanted to say, I see all of your comments about Angela and the fact that Angela was not in the wrong in this scenario at all. And I had said in the story, if the story is true, like if the story had really gone down the way Harry would have us believe, that it was just as simple as calling a person up on a whim to get something that you wanted, then Angela didn't come out very well in the story. But I also said in that episode, I don't think that's the true story. I do not think that Angela was in the wrong here. I think that what happened was Harry and Meghan, thinking that they had no need of protocol, did not make proper arrangements before the hairdresser arrived, and then on a whim decided, hey, what we need right now, and it's everybody else's business to hop when we say hop and jump when we say jump. And Angela wasn't available to hop and jump the way they wanted her to, and so they took that as some kind of personal insult to them. So anyway, I want you all to know, I think Angela didn't do anything wrong. I think that it's just I think that it's the classic narcissist telling a story in which they are the victim or they are the heroine. And every time you hear a story from a person like that, it's always like, the logic here, though, that doesn't add up. You know, they continue to press forward. Oh, I was victimized. Oh, you wouldn't believe the way everybody acted. It's like, yeah, you're right. I don't believe it because this is a lie. Anyway, again, I cannot wait to get to revenge because there's just going to be so much reckoning of truth. All right, let's get on into this. Thank you again very much for subscribing. Many of you are subscribing, and I am so grateful for it. And so many of you are sharing the videos. So many of you are coming back saying, hey, I shared this on Facebook. I shared this on Twitter. You know, thank you so much. It's really, really kind of you because, you know, it really helps the algorithm when you comment and you like and you subscribe and all these things. It just helps out. So thank you so much. I know there's lots of things to watch, so you investing your time here is a very big compliment. Thank you. All right. Time for the wedding. Harry says that he stood at the altar in his household cavalry frock coat. So, lest you forget, William didn't get to wear his, but Harry got to wear his. And he says that he was watching Meg come down the aisle and the soloist was singing Eternal Source of Light Divine. Yeah, well, Handel's talking about God there, okay? But anyway, he keeps thinking, oh, you know, that he had chosen that song for her to walk down. It's like so sacrilegious in a way. Oh gosh, what does Harry not know? And as she's walking down, he says, amazing, I could even hear the music over the sound of my own heartbeat. As Meg stepped up and took my hand, the present dissolved and the past came rushing back. Our first tentative messages on Instagram, our first meeting at Soho House, our first trip to Botswana, our first excited exchanges after my phone went into the river, our first roast chicken, our first flights back and forth across the Atlantic, the first time I told her I love you, hearing her say it back, Guy in splints, Steve the grumpy swan, the brutal fight to keep us safe from the press. And now here we were, the finishing line, the starting line also. These are the things that's going through his mind. This is the depth of their relationship. Y'all, what? As he's cataloging everything that has been so profound, he's got to throw in that Guy was in splints and Steve the grumpy swan. Like, he has so few things to hang on to that he's experienced with her that Steve the grumpy swan makes the list as she's walking down the aisle to Eternal Source of Light Divine. Okay. I mean, what are these non-moments? And then I saw a peanut butter sandwich next to the subway stairs. Remember that time? I mean, it's just like, what is this? Okay, anyway. Here they were finally getting married. And it was a beautiful moment because, you know, quite frankly, not much of the wedding plan had really gone to plan. And he'd reminded himself that none of those things had been the plan. You know, he could have been upset about it before, but none of that was the plan. This was the plan. He and Meg getting married. This love, you know, finally having a chance to do it. And he looked at Paul walking Meg down the aisle. And the thing is that it wasn't her dad, but it was special just the same. And she had been moved when Paul had offered to walk her down the aisle. Still, it didn't make up for it didn't make up for her dad's behavior, you know, or how the press had used him. But still, at least Paul had stepped in. Okay, you guys. You know, I don't do a whole lot of external work when it comes to this book because the whole point of this series is let's catch him in all the lies he's telling us without any external sources. But I do just want to say, I saw Piers Morgan interview over the weekend, and he was talking about Meg and how he had always thought that she was a vapid Hollywood starlet. I mean, he'd known that early. But then he was talking about the fact that her behavior before the wedding was so shady. And when none of her family came and all the business with her dad, and she made no effort to figure out a way for her dad to come. And then it all came out that, oh, actually, it wasn't the dad of his own. He wasn't so beleaguered and confused and put upon by the media. She had entrapped him, because the truth is she didn't want him to come. He is an odd man. I mean, putting plywood over your windows far before any of this had happened. He's just kind of not very put together, and he wouldn't make a good appearance. She didn't want him. And so she acted like, oh, he has wounded me. He didn't come. He abandoned me. He canceled last minute. No, you orchestrated it so he wouldn't come because you were embarrassed of him. And then you could act like the poor put upon victim. My daddy didn't even come to my own wedding. My daddy, where are you? It's the demon press again, stepping in, ruining my life. My daddy would have come, but then the paparazzi, they tricked him. No, you organized that. And there's receipts. So he says that his Aunt Jane stood and did a reading in honor of Mummy. They read from Song of Solomon. He says he and Meg chose it. I bet they did. And the passage is, arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. For love is strong as death, passion fierce as the grave. And he loved that line, strong as death and fierce as the grave. Yes, I thought, yes. But what I think to myself is, isn't it interesting that all his positives are negatives? That death and graves and imagery to that extent, it's like the only thing his mind can understand. It's always got to be these extremes with him. Then he talks about the ring that he had given to Meg. It was made out of Welsh gold. There's a hunk of Welsh gold that he'd been worried there wouldn't be enough for his bride to have, and Kate's ring had been made out of the same hunk of Welsh gold. They'd managed to scrap some together for Meghan. And he says of the ring, Granny told me that this was nearly the last of it. Last of the gold. That's how I felt about Meg. What does that mean? Okay, then he goes on with this lie, which has already been debunked, so I don't even know why he's still pressing the issue. He says that the Archbishop reached the official part, and he spoke the few words that made them the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, which were titles that had been bestowed by Granny. And the Archbishop joined them until death. Did they part? And Harry says he'd already done this similarly days earlier in their garden, in a small ceremony, just the two of them. Guy and Pula, the only witnesses. He admits it was unofficial and non-binding, except in their souls. They were grateful for every person in and around St. George's and watching on TV. But their love began in private, and being public had been mostly pain, so they wanted the first consecration of their love, their first vows, to be private as well. Magical as the formal ceremony was, we'd both come to feel slightly frightened of crowds. Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, so he says that, underscoring that feeling, the first thing they saw when they were walking back up the aisle and out of the church, other than the stream of smiling faces, were snipers. Apparently on the rooftops, amid the bunting, behind the waterfalls of streamers, police told me that it was unusual but necessary for them to have placed those snipers everywhere that he claims he saw. Isn't a sniper supposed to be unobtrusive? Aren't you supposed to not see them? Anyway, apparently his keen eyesight picked up on him. And he said that the necessity for the snipers was because of the unprecedented number of threats that the police had been picking up on. Okay. I'm not even going to dignify that foolishness with a response. Okay. Here we come to the first of these non-grievances. I don't understand. I will never understand what he's banging on about right here. He says that their honeymoon had been a closely guarded secret. He said they had left London in a car that had been disguised as a removals van. And he said the windows had been covered with cardboard, and they went to the Mediterranean for 10 days. He said it was glorious to be away on the sea in the sun, but they were also sick the whole time. Can you imagine? It's probably because they both realized what they've just done. He said, though, that it was, the buildup of the wedding had just worn them down. They'd had to fight for every little scrap that they'd been given, this multi-million-dollar event, but, no need to mention that. He said that they returned in time for the official June celebration of Granny's birthday, the Trooping of the Color. It was one of their first public appearances newlyweds, and everyone was in a good mood and upbeat. But then, literally, he writes, Kate asked Meg what she thought of her first Trooping of the Color. And Meg joked, colorful. And a yawning silence threatened to swallow us all whole. That's the end of the story. I'm sorry, what? What are you talking about? This was the beginning of the end for Meghan and Catherine. That is such a non-exchange. Why did you even include it? Not one tiny part of that makes sense, neither on Catherine's end or Meghan's end. What do you think of the Trooping of the Color? It's colorful. A yawning silence. Truly, where was the editor? I'd love to meet that person. I just want to sit down and pick their brain. Just be like, can you that passage? What's that about? Well, maybe you can explain what the underlying reasoning is here. What is my feeble brain not understanding here? Why was that included? Anyway, the yawning silence that's the stamp on this relationship now. Apparently, this was the beginning of the end. Because days later, Meghan went on her first official trip with Granny. They bonded. Meghan came back and said it had been a stunning success. They bonded over the dogs. They bonded over their shared love of this, that, and the other. Meghan had told Granny, we're wanting to start our family very soon. Well, I should think so, Meghan. The clock's ticking. And Granny had given her tips for how to induce labor when it came time to do so. A bumpy car ride's never a bad thing. They'd laugh, they'd joke, they'd loved it. But the papers, of course, the press, the rabid press always trying to rain on her parade, had come out and said that it had been an unmitigated disaster. They portrayed Meg as pushy, uppity, ignorant of royal protocol. Because, and Harry writes this, because she'd made the unthinkable mistake of getting into a car before Granny. And the press said there was something drastically wrong with her for doing that. There is, though. Far apart from the fact that she's the queen, she's an elderly woman. You're going to shove ahead and be like, elbow out of the way, old lady, I've got to get in the car. Common decency would say, let the elderly go first. Let her get in the car. Settle her in. Then you can climb your little skinny butt in. What in the world? When Donald Trump walked in front of the Queen, everyone was like, what in the world? What? Does he have no idea about how to conduct himself with royalty? And well, he should have been called out. But when Meg wants to rush ahead of the Queen, jump in the car and be like, you coming? She can't understand why that's rude. Truly, I'm so sick and tired of her blundering through life and then acting like it's everybody else's fault. Okay, we gotta move on. She came back and told Harry, no, I actually didn't jump in front of her. Granny told me to get in and I did, so I'm not sure what the papers are talking about. I don't know why they always have to make it some horrible thing that I did, but I actually was just doing what Granny said. No, I call BS on that because I don't think Granny would have told you to do a thing that would have openly broken protocol, knowing that you would have been criticized for it. I think you rushed ahead and then you came back and knew you could tell anything to your husband because he'd believe whatever. Harry could walk in on Meghan with another man in his bed and she'd say, oh, I'm just practicing for a scene on Suits, even though she's not even on Suits anymore. And he'd be like, well, that makes sense. That's a good excuse. I mean, it's like he could be told whatever He never questions her. So of course he doesn't question her here when she's like, no, Granny told me to. I didn't just shove in front of her. No, that's not what happened. The press, whatever Meghan did, they said was a breach of protocol. They dogged her continually for her lack of class. They said that it was ridiculous that she had not worn a hat in Granny's presence. Why was she not covering her head? And Meghan claims that the palace had told her specifically not to wear a hat at this one specific occasion. One time, Granny had worn green in honor of the victims of Grenfell Tower, but no one had told Meghan to wear green. And so then she got trashed in the press because people said she didn't care about the victims. I just find it odd if you are going with Granny to many of these events in which you are going to be seen by hundreds of people and you're going to honor certain victims, that the palace, as they are, giving you permission for what you're wearing or giving you guidance for what you're wearing, would not have said, we are going to wear green and honor the victims because that's what this event is for. I just don't believe that she got no help here. I'm sure this is what I think happened. I bet they said something along the lines of, traditionally for this event, we would choose green. And she hears, oh, it's an option. And so she didn't. And then because they weren't persistent about it, because they didn't say, you will do this, she says, no one told me. I feel completely confident that she was told, this is the tradition, this is what we will do, this is typically what is done, because they thought that she would understand, and that's what you'll do. But no. Anyway. Oh, now we come. Now we come to the clearing of the air between William and Catherine, and Harry and Meghan. So ever since that horrific trooping of the color comment that just drove a train straight through the relationship, things had not been right. So it's time to go have tea with William and Catherine. June 2018. They said that they walked over one late afternoon, and Harry saw Meg's eyes widen. Jealousy. As they entered the front door and walked past their front sitting room, down their hallway into their study. Wow, Meg said several times. Listen, this... I loved this passage. The wallpaper, the crown molding, the walnut bookshelves lined with color-coordinated volumes, the priceless art, gorgeous, gorgeous. Like a museum. And we both told them so. We complimented them lavishly on their renovation, though we also thought sheepishly of our IKEA lamps. Our discount sofa, recently bought on sale with Meg's credit card from sofa.com. Oh goodness, as a person whose home is furnished with hand-me-downs, IKEA things, and cast-offs that I found on the side of the road, which were particularly promising, I'm not making fun of them for having things that aren't especially nice. I don't have things that are especially nice. I mean, look at this. But the jealousy that is dripping off the page is hilarious to me. I love it. I love it. Our sofa that Meg purchased with her credit card from sofa.com. Oh, I love it. So they're in the study. He and Meg love each other so much that they cannot be apart. So they choose the love seat, unlike William and Kate, who choose to sit in individual chairs. Kate was sitting in the ridiculous details that we don't need. Kate opposite us in a leather-clad fender before the fireplace. William was to her left in an armchair. There was a tray of tea and biscuits. For 10 minutes, we did the classic small talk. How are the kids and how was the honeymoon? Then, of course, Meg's like, there's not enough controversy here. Let me stir the waters. So Meg acknowledges, she's like, all right, enough of that. Let's talk about why I'm really here. Meg then acknowledged the tension among the four of us and ventured that it might go back to those early days when she'd first joined the family, because apparently there'd been a misunderstanding. Apparently, Kate thought Meg had wanted her fashion contacts. And Meg says, now, Kate, I know that you think I wanted your fashion contacts. I want to be very clear, I did not need yours because I have my own. And I think maybe we got off on the wrong step there, because you didn't want to share something with me, but I actually didn't need you to. And then, of course, with the wedding, those infernal bridesmaids dresses, and everything just got so magnified during the wedding. And I just think that you don't understand me. And I just want to clear the air, Catherine, because it's not the way I wanted things to start off, and I just think you're kind of choosing to see the negative. This is what Meghan says. But apparently, what Meghan thought the problems were, that wasn't even the tip of the iceberg. Harry claims this, and I am just like, okay, you're going to have to come up with a better lie than this. This doesn't even make sense. He says that it turned out that there was other things that they were mad about, things which Harry and Meghan knew nothing of. Willie and Kate were apparently upset that they hadn't been given Easter presents. What are you talking about? Who would be over there fuming that they had not received an Easter present? Probably Meghan. But real people don't care about things like that. Harry says, Easter presents? Was that a thing? Willie and I never exchanged Easter presents. Paul always made a big deal about Easter, sure, but that was Paul. And so, of course, Harry claims, we apologized profusely. I'm sorry that you're upset about the Easter presents. We apologize. Okay. So then Harry and Meghan are like, okay, well, that's ridiculous that they're saying the thing about Easter. As long as we're going to start pulling punches, let's roll up our sleeves and get in the ring. They say, Meghan's like, well, we are sorry about the Easter presents. Didn't even know that was a thing you wanted. But quite frankly, we really didn't appreciate the fact that you two switched place cards and changed seats at our wedding. Because, see, we had arranged the tables according to the American tradition. Couples sit together, not separately. And lo and behold, I look over and your table is not the way I had arranged it. And the couples were all mixed up and not sitting together. I don't really know where you got off doing that. That's a question mark for me, says Meghan. But William and Catherine insist that somebody else did it. And they said, we didn't do that at your wedding, but let us remind you about how you actually are the ones who did that at Pippa's wedding. I just do not believe this conversation ever took place. Who cares about the place cards? They're not sitting at your table. Who cares where they're sitting at their own table? Would anybody ever make this much of a fuss? So they're like, we didn't do it at your wedding, but P.S., you guys did it at Pippa's wedding. Then Harry and Meghan are like, no, we didn't. We didn't do that. It goes back and forth. They said, Harry goes, we'd been separated by a huge flower arrangement at Pippa's wedding. It was right between us. And though we desperately wanted to sit together, we hadn't done a thing about it. We never would have done something so tacky and tasteless. So there they are, airing their grievances. And none of it's doing anyone good because it's all tit for tat. They weren't getting anywhere. Then listen to this. Kate looked out into the garden, gripping the edges of the leather so tightly that her fingers were white. And she said that she was owed an apology. Can any of you guys see Catherine sitting there with her claws? Just fingers white on the edge of her leather seat. I can imagine one person in that room doing it, and it's not Catherine. Meg said, well, what do I owe you an apology for? You hurt my feelings, Meghan. When? Please tell me. What are you talking about? I told you I couldn't remember something, and you said it was my hormones. What are you talking about? Kate mentioned a phone call in which they discussed the timing of wedding rehearsals. Meg said, oh, yes, okay, I remember. All right. What I actually said was, you couldn't remember something, and I said, it's not a big deal. Because you just had a baby. It's hormones. And Kate's eyes widened. Yes, you talked about my hormones. We're not close enough for you to talk about my hormones. Meg's eyes got wide too. She looked genuinely confused. I bet she did, because she's all up in people's spaces, hugging folks that she doesn't know, and borrowing people's lip gloss that she shouldn't be asking for, and discussing people's hormones. It's like, girl, you need to realize that boundaries are not a negative thing, okay? It doesn't make you more cool. It doesn't make you more hip. It doesn't make you more likable to be up in people's spaces all the time. Meghan goes through life acting like she is just so charming that why wouldn't you want her all up in your business, I can't with her. Okay, I have a lot of things to say, but I'll say it after we get done with this. Okay, so we're not close enough for you to talk about my hormones. Meg's eyes are wide. I'm sorry I talked about your hormones. That's just the way I talk with my girlfriends. And then Willie points out to Meg, it's rude, Meghan. It's not what's done here in Britain. You need to kindly take your finger out of my face, says Meghan. Literally, these are the words on the page. Was this really happening? Had it really come to this? Shouting at each other about place cards and her hormones? Meg said that she'd never intentionally do anything to hurt Kate, and if she ever did, she asked Kate to please just let her know so it wouldn't happen again. We all hugged, kind of. And then I said that we'd better get going. I have so many thoughts about this passage. But my first thought is this. The pettiness of it, I strongly disagree with. I do not believe that William and Catherine would have bothered to waste their time in conversation that is so meaningless that nothing could have ever been resolved from these specific instances, right? So I just don't think they would have bothered with it. I don't think that they would have been talking about, the place cards at the wedding. I certainly don't think anyone was upset about an Easter present. They don't need Easter presents. That's not that. Where did that lie even come from? How did they even conceive of that one? I mean, when Harry sat down to write his book, what made him go, oh, and I'm going to write about the time they said I needed to bring an Easter present? What are you talking about? They didn't say that. And it just seems to me that if you're going to make up a bunch of garbage, better do, this is the best you could do. So either he is taking real incidences and stripping them of every actual fact so that whatever's left on the page is just this film that we can't quite, what is this, What left this strange film? And I just feel like William and Catherine are just too classy to have ever had this conversation. So I just call foul on the whole thing. But the other thing that I think is, I raised an eyebrow to, is this whole story about the hormones. Okay. I feel like if they had a conversation, if Catherine felt that she was owed an apology, I don't even think it would have been on this level. I think that there was deeper things that were said. If she said, you owe me an apology, it wasn't because Meghan said something about her hormones. I don't think any woman out there would be that offended by this instance, that your hands would just be gripping your chair, your knuckles are turning white, you're outraged that someone mentioned your hormones. There was so much more condescension, so much more rudeness, so much more to that conversation that she and Meghan must have had for Catherine to have felt that she needed to bring up to her, you're rude to me. You're condescending. You're dismissive to me, It could never have been. It would never have caused a breach in the family if Meghan had truly said, oh, that's okay, you can't remember, you said a baby. Who can remember anything after you've had a baby? It is like if she'd said the thing about the hormones, I mean, again, that's Meghan being she always is, overly intrusive in her desperate efforts to be charming. And I think that, you know, Catherine may not have liked the hormone comment, but I don't think it would have thrown her on her back like this. But that's all we're getting. Like, of course, that's all Harry's going to tell us because it doesn't make sense. So he can act like, oh, look, they're the weird ones. Look how they couldn't get over the hormone comment. I guarantee you it was more than just, oh, you just can't remember because your hormones because you had a baby. Because I think that if Catherine might have been like, that's kind of rude, but I don't think she'd be scandalized by it to the extent that it broke the family apart. She's just not unreasonable like that. And this story is unreasonable. Okay, moving on. He says the staff sensed the friction. They read the papers, and thus there was this frequent bickering around the office. There was rivalries and jealousies, competing agendas, and it all poisoned the atmosphere. Who was added in recently to the family who could have messed things up? It's like, hello, what's the common denominator to all of this pettiness? Oh, one Meghan Markle. It's like, no wonder the family's angry. And can't Harry see it? Why was everything going swimmingly and then Meghan enters the picture and no one can get along? He's such a dimwit. He says that everyone was working around the clock. There was many demands from the press, such a constant stream of errors that needed clearing up, and we just didn't have nearly enough people or resources. He says that at best they were only able to address 10% of what was out there. Then stop worrying about it. If it's an insurmountable objective to clarify every error that's out there, you find something worthy of your time. That's not worthy of your time, and neither is it you cannot ask people to give their entire lives to an unwinnable cause. Can you imagine being employed by Harry and Meghan, who are constantly setting you out to go and fix a problem that cannot be fixed? And then they're over there raging and angry, and it's like, what a waste of everybody's lives. What a waste of everybody's time. He says that more than once a staff member would be slumped across their desk weeping. This is a new tenor up in this office that heretofore had not been present. And who can we blame? Well, Harry says that Willie blamed one person, Meg. And how could anybody do differently? Harry says, he told me so several times, and he got cross when I told him he was out of line. He was just repeating the press narrative, spouting fake stories he'd heard and been told. The great irony, I told him, was that the real villains were the people he'd imported into the office. People from government who didn't seem impervious to this kind of strife, but they were addicted to it. They had a knack for backstabbing and a talent for intrigue, and they were constantly setting our two groups of staff against each other. Oh, it was them setting everybody on edge, was it? It was William's people. William's staff was the one that was constantly backstabbing and causing strife, not Meghan. Well, see, but meanwhile, while all this is going on, Meghan is putting up a beautiful front as the person who's just this kind, giving, loving, never-ending fountain of grace and dignity and turning the other cheek. Because listen to this. Harry writes that meanwhile, in the midst of all this, Meg managed to remain calm. Of course, she is the puppet master. He says despite what certain people were saying about her, he'd never heard her speak a bad word about anybody. Or to anybody. Well, he wouldn't recognize it if she did. He says on the contrary, he'd watched her redouble her efforts to reach out and to spread kindness. And she'd send out handwritten thank you notes, check on staff who are unwell, send baskets of food or flowers or goodies to anyone who is struggling or depressed or off sick. Why are there so many people struggling, depressed, and off sick? He says the offices were often dark and cold, so she'd warm them up with new lamps and space heaters. All bought with her personal credit card, mind you. She didn't need to do that. There's funds for it. She brought pizza and biscuits and hosted tea parties and ice cream socials. And he wants you to know that she shared all the freebies she received, clothes and perfumes and makeup, with all the women in the office. Not out of any largesse. She's not allowed to keep those things. So you don't get points for sharing stuff you couldn't have kept anyway. Harry is so dumb. He says that he stood back in awe at her ability or determination to always see the good in people. The size of her heart was really brought home to him one day. Because do you remember Mr. R? Remember when he lived in the Badger set at the basement of Kensington Palace? Remember that whole debacle? And remember the guy who used to park his van right in front of Harry's few windows so that he wasn't let in any light? And the wife who cut people's hair and then, according to him, threw it into his windows? Well, Mr. R had suffered a tragedy. And apparently his adult son had died. And Meg, Harry says, didn't know Mr. R. Neither did she know the son. But she knew the family had been neighbors, and she'd often see them walking their dogs. And she felt tremendous sorrow for them and wrote the father a letter, expressing her condolences and telling him that she wanted to give him a hug, but she didn't know if it would be appropriate. With the letter, she included a gardenia to plant in his son's memory. Well, a week later, Mr. R appeared at the front door of Notcott, and he handed Meg a thank you note and gave her a tight hug. And Harry says he felt so proud of her, and he really regretted his feud with Mr. R. Okay. All very nice things. All exceedingly manipulative. It does not progress your purposes to be rude to people. You can't you can't just be rude all the time. Of course she's over there trying to show, look how good I am, look how kind I am. But she's of that personality where it's like, she does all this stuff for everybody so that they in turn will do for her. It's never out of the generosity of her own heart. It's, I will pay into this bank account so that I can go and make, generous withdrawals from it. It's never just, I want to be a nice person. It's always with the intention of coming back, knocking on your door and being like, hey, remember how I did X, Y, and Z? You owe me. Okay, so now we're going to get into how they want kids. And he says that Meghan, they knew that they wanted to have kids immediately. Meghan was so stressed out. She was losing all this weight. She didn't weigh enough to get pregnant. And even though she was eating all the shepherd's pie and all this, she just kept dropping weight. And her friends recommended that she go to this doctor who might help her conceive. And Harry writes that this doctor, as he understood him, sorted people into categories. And he doesn't really recall which category the doctor sorted Meg into, but it was a category that said you have to gain weight. So, and that was the barrier to her conceiving. So she needed to gain 5 pounds, the doctor said, and then she'd get pregnant. What? I've never heard of, massive obstacles to pregnancy, but when you gain those 5 pounds, I mean, I guess if you're really, really thin and, your cycle has stopped, okay, whatever, maybe it's possible. All right, so she needed to gain those 5 pounds so she could get pregnant. I guess she just started and didn't stop. Anyway, she ate, and soon she had gotten that 5 pounds. And they looked hopefully at the calendar. They were really excited. Now they could finally really start thinking about having a baby. Now he tells us a story that I wish none of us had heard. He says that they had gone to Scotland to the Castle of May to spend a few days with Pa. Harry claims that the bond between Meg and Pa was stronger than ever and only growing. And at dinner, over dinner, Pa learned that Meg and Gran shared the same birthday, August 4th, and this just put Pa in a great mood. Into such a wonderful mood that he started telling fairy tales. Pa says that had they ever heard about the Selkies, which were Scottish mermaids, he said. They took the form of seals and cruised along the shore outside the castle within a stone's throw of where they were sitting. So when you see a seal, he advised, you never can tell, sing to it. They often sing back. Oh, come on, you're telling fairy tales, says Meg. No, it's absolutely true, says Pa. Did Pa promise that the Selkies might also grant a wish? We talked a bit during the dinner about the stress we'd been under. If we could just convince the papers to back off, we said, for a little while. Yeah, stress, it's all self-made. You're under so much stress, but no one pities you because everyone has told you, you want to stop being stressed out, stop reading the papers. But they won't stop, and then they sit there and wring their hands and weep on each other's necks. But you made this stress yourself. Anyway, Pa nods, but he felt very important to remind them, just don't read it. And of course, they come back at him with, yes, Paul, we know, don't read it. Anyway, they had a nice time. They all left from tea, laughing, talking about one thing and another. And then suddenly, listen to them lay the groundwork for this, Pa's butler burst into the room, pulling a landline behind him. Your Royal Highness, Her Majesty. And Pa sits bolt upright and says, oh, yes. And he goes to take the phone. But no, it's for Meghan. The Queen is calling Meghan. And listen to this. The Queen, no, sir, she's calling for the Duchess. Oh, we all looked stunned. Meg tentatively reached for the phone. It seemed Granny was calling to talk about Meg's father. She was responding to a letter Meg had written her asking for advice and help. Meg said that she didn't know how to make the press stop interviewing him, enticing him to say horrid things. Granny now suggested that Meg forget the press, go and see her father and try to talk some sense into him. Meg explained that he lived in a Mexican border town, and she didn't know how she'd ever get through the airport and through the press surrounding his house, then through that part of town and then back again quietly and safely. Granny acknowledged the many problems with this plan. Well, in that case, says Granny, perhaps write him a letter. Pa agreed it was a splendid idea. Look at them rewriting the narrative for us again. So it's Granny's idea that she send that ridiculous, deplorable letter. Remember the stupid calligraphied letter that she sends to her dad, dripping with, pretend kindness? And look at them pitting this on Granny, that this was Granny's idea. But I call BS on this for multiple reasons. If you think that you can't possibly go see your father, because how am I going to get there? How there's going to be all these problems at the airport. There's going to be problems getting into town, all this. You have tons of security, tons of people at your disposal whose job it is to arrange these, who would know how to arrange a rendezvous. It is not beyond the pale, and nor do you have to come up with how to do it. You have all these people who can help you. And if your dad is the source of all of the stress and anxiety that you're living under because your dad won't stop yapping, and the only thing to do is to stop him and to talk some sense into him, and the best way to do that would be in person, what is up with all the excuse making as to why you can't ever do things? Well, I would, but I just really can't. It's a good idea, but I just can't. And, here are my pathetic reasons as to why I can't. Yeah, think, how am I going to get there? I don't know. How about on any number of the private planes you seem to be able to corral at your disposal? How about all of the security that you have that would know how to get you in and out of a situation? How about you don't show up at your dad's house? Why don't you guys arrange to meet at another location? There's 1,000 things you could do to make this happen. I'm so sick of the excuses, and I don't think Granny would have bought the excuses either. Okay. Back to the seals. Harry says that he and Meg went down to the beach in front of the castle after this conversation with Granny. It was a real chilly day, but the sun was bright. They were standing out on the rocks looking out at the sea, and what should they see? A head. A pair of soulful eyes. Look, a seal. Look, Harry having another encounter with an animal, another magical encounter with an animal. Does he live in a Disney movie? The head bobbed up and down, and the eyes were very clearly watching us. Look, another. And just as instructed, I ran to the water's edge and sang to them. I serenaded them. No answer. But of course, Princess Magic over here is going to come up and sing to the seals, and they're going to sing back. Meg joined me and sang to them, and now, of course, they sing back. She really is magic, I thought. Even the seals know it. Suddenly, all over the water, heads were bobbing up, singing to her. A seal opera. Silly superstition, maybe, but I didn't care. I counted it a good omen. I took off my clothes and jumped into the water and swam with them. It's freezing cold, I doubt it. Later, Pa's Aussie chef was horrified. He told us that this had been a supremely bad idea. more ill-advised than diving heedless into the darkest water of the Okavango. This part of the Scottish coast was teeming with killer whales, the chef said, and singing to the seals was like calling them to their blood-soaked deaths. Another animal encounter. Anyway, Harry says he shook his head because it had been a lovely fairy tale. Why did it all have to become dark so fast? Why was everyone always trying to snatch out these good things from my hands? I collected this lovely memory, and then stupid Aussie chef had to say that there was killer whales nearby. Oh, believe me, there's a killer whale nearby, and you're married to her. Okay, so then, and we're almost done. Oh, well, Meg's late. She, I guess her hormones are doing something. And he says they bought 2 home pregnancy tests, one for a backup, and she took both of them into the bathroom at Knotcott. Harry says he was lying on the bed, and while waiting for her to come out, he falls asleep. How long was she in there? What was she really doing in there? Okay, well, somehow she manages to bring out 2 positive pregnancy tests. He says that she said she hadn't looked at them. She'd just been waiting for him. So long that he's falling asleep on the bed? She puts the wands on the nightstand. He only kept a few things on the nightstand he wants to let you know. One of which was a blue box of his mom's hair. Anyway, right next to the box of hair, they put the pregnancy tests. Let's see what Mummy can do with this situation, he says. Talk about an unhinged statement. Then, after placing the wands next to the hair in this magical incantation, he reaches for the wands and peers at the little windows, and they're blue. Well, apparently with this particular pregnancy test, blue meant that there was a baby. Oh, wow. Well then. They hugged and they kissed. He put the wands back on the nightstand, and he thinks, thank you, Selkies. And he also thinks, thank you, Mummy. And I'm over here going, how about you thank God? The Selkies and Mummy had nothing to do with it. All right, but we're gonna wrap it up with this. You just getting married, she's getting married to Jack. Everyone's deliriously happy for them. Jack's one of their favorite people. And Meghan and Harry had to head off to their first official foreign tour as a married couple, but they made sure to delay the departure for a few days so that they could make it to the wedding. They were also particularly excited because at this gathering, this wedding, they are going to tell everybody the news. They're going to pull people aside and let them know, hey, we're pregnant. They would, wouldn't they? Look at them upstaging Yuju's day, stealing her thunder. It's like, this is her day. Why are you making it all about how you are having a baby? You can tell people about that later. You don't need to use Yuju's wedding as the place where it gets to be all about you. I find that very rude. Anyway, he says that he had a chance to tell Pa first, and Pa was delighted to learn that he was going to be a grandfather for a 4th time. His wide smile warmed Harry. And then Harry goes on to say that at St. George's Hall, Meg and he pulled Willie aside. And Willie smiled and said that they had to tell Kate. He was very excited for them. She was across the room talking to Pippa. And Harry said that it's fine, we'll just do it later. But William insisted and gestures for Catherine to come, we've got something to say. So they go, Kate comes and they tell her, and Harry writes, she also gave us a big smile and a hearty congratulations. They both reacted as I'd hoped, as I'd wished. What are they going to do, kick you in the crotch? I mean, like, you just finished saying that you're having a baby. What? Nobody's going to be like, damn it. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, why are you even being like, then Paul was happy for us. Then William was happy for us. And will you believe it? So was Catherine. Again, what world is he living in? Why is he always expecting everybody to be so hateful to him? I don't understand what world he lives in. All right, that's the end of our reading today because we have roared up on our hour. But can you even with this? I don't understand what I just read. I don't understand about the fight with William and Catherine in their lavish home. I don't understand about the Selkies singing to the Selkies, swimming with them. I don't understand the stories about the wedding and the snipers on the roof, because there was such a huge chance that they were all going to get mowed down. I don't understand about the fighting staff and how he couldn't understand that Meghan was at the root of all of this. I don't understand the obsession with the press. I don't understand any of this book. Parts 1 and 2 made some sense to me. As soon as Meghan comes into the story, none of it makes sense. And it's because this book was always real shallow on the details. But now that Meghan's entered the picture, you can't tell the truth. Because if you tell the truth, you'll expose her. So he's got to just keep things on this real shallow, no good details level. And it just makes for a really boring book, because it's like the whole time, and I said this in the last episode, so I won't belabor the point. The whole time, you're wondering, yeah, well, what really happened? Because nothing that you're saying we could not reach this conclusion based on the details that you've given. So I'm not really invested in the story at this point, because I don't know what the story is. Harry, I still won't ever stop hoping that there is some redemption to this man's pain. He clearly is in pain, or he wouldn't have chosen to be with somebody like this. He either thinks he deserves to be with somebody like this, or he made, and I think this is far more likely, he made the massive mistake of thinking that she was better than him, and that if he could earn her love, then he would be okay, and he could accept himself. And I just feel sad for him, but I also feel annoyed with him, because I think at a certain point, you have to stop being cowardly. At a certain point, you have to take stock of yourself and say, where am I? What is this? What have I woken up into? Like, come to the end of yourself and realize, I don't have a lot of good answers. If I did, I wouldn't be in this situation with somebody who has run off every one of her friends, all of her family members except for her mother, who wasn't really part of her life growing up, yet somehow now that she has money, fame, and fortune, now Doria has crawled back up into her lap. She's got no family. She's run off all of your family. You are a global laughingstock. Like, at what point are you just going to say, some of this is my fault? Like, at what point do you just finally say, I'm really, really tired of blaming everybody else, because I can't control anybody else. I can only control me. So what have I contributed to this destiny? And it's cowardly not to take stock of yourself. And I just feel like Harry, it's always been somebody else's, every moment of his life has been somebody else's job to fix for him. Like, what am I going to do with my life? What am I going to do with my gap year? What am I going to do with my career? Where am I going to live? How am I going to clothe and feed myself? It's always been somebody else's problem. I don't think he has worked out the muscles to sit down and be honest with himself. I don't think he possesses the ability to come to the end of himself, because it's just, so far, it's always somebody else's problem. So I don't know what's going to happen to Harry. But I don't give up hope. He's not dead yet. And I just really hope that some wise person can come into his life, that his circle can open up into somebody who will just sit him down and say, how'd this happen? And not like an Oprah, how'd this happen? And now let me, listen to all your lies and substantiate all these negative claims with you. I don't know. I feel sorry for him. But anyway, that is the end of this video. I'll see you again later this week. If you're on spring break, happy spring break. And if not, we'll come together later and find out what happens once this baby comes. I think that we're going to find ourselves with more crying on the floor, if I recall correctly. All right. You have a wonderful rest of your day. Have a good rest of your week. I'll see you later. Bye.